Hello Year 11 and welcome here to the first video for our 7th topic for the year. Who can believe we're already up to our 7th topic? Well, we're going to begin with percentage increase and decrease. We've looked at a certain amount of this in our previous topic. Okay, some things to remember: that we're dealing with percentages, change it to a decimal, divide it by 100, right? Also, what we're going to be looking at in some of these questions, I'll go over it in a bit more detail, but we're looking for, right, what we're really asking here with percentage increase and decrease is what percentage of the total will we be left with, or will we have at the end? Okay. Yeah, I'll explain that. Here's example 1. Increase $145 by 20%. If I start with the full amount, 100%, and I increase it by 20%, I'm going to end up with 120%. So what's 120% of 145? It is 1.2, like 1.20 if you like. That's 120% times 145. Equals, and now it comes to the calculator. Here we go. And 1.2 times 145 equals 174. Okay, so the key there is not to find 20% of 145 and add it on. That will work, but it's a little bit more work. Right, it's a little bit of extra effort. Right, I want to find 120% of the original amount. For example 2 here, similar but different, decrease this amount by 35%. I could find 35% and subtract it from the $7.60. But more efficiently, and more helpful when we come to other problems down the track, is if I take 35% away, I'll have 65% left. Right? That's 100% minus 35% is 65%, and I can do that in my head, I suppose. So I want to find 65% of $7.60. So that's 0.65, right? 65 over 100. Times, right, percentage of something is times 760, and by the magic of technology, 0.65 times 7.6 equals $4.94. Okay, there we go. Example 3 here. Good old Maurice. 82% of Maurice's wage is $869.20. What is 77% of Maurice's wage? Well, this seems sort of horribly complicated in some ways. But the trick that we're going to use here, or the technique, I should say, rather than a trick, the technique we're going to use here is one called the unitary method. I'm going to find what 1% is. If 82% is this much, then 1% of some unknown total will be this figure here divided by 82. I'm just going to put a little square bracket here and a 1% in there, right? That's not sort of calculation, that's just to remind us what we're doing. I'm going to say 869.20 divided by 82. Right, that's going to find 1% for me. So 869.2, oops. 69.2 divided by 82 equals $10.60. Right, so 1% is $10.60. If I wanted to find Maurice's full wage, well, I could multiply that by 100. But you know, I've got 1%. I want to know 77%. So now I'm going to take my $10.60 and multiply it by 77. Okay, so first I found 1%, then I find the 77% that I need. Of course, you could do all of that in one go, but, you know, it kind of steps away from this idea of this unitary method. It makes it a little less clear what we're doing, perhaps. So 816.20. Righto. So find 1% in that case first. And in our 4th example here, in the last of the video, last week we're saying the price of petrol fell by 18%, and this week it went up by 24%. Express the price change over the fortnight as a percentage. Now, it would be a mistake to say that it's gone up by 6%, because it fell by 18% of the starting price. It rose by 24% of a cheaper, right, of a lower figure, right? It was 18% of a bigger number and 24% of a smaller number, right, after it had already been reduced. Right? If I had half a cake and you had 3/4 of a cake, just because 3/4 is bigger than half, right, that doesn't mean that it's more. It depends how big the cakes were, right? So we can't just add or subtract those percentages like that. Now, the other problem with this question is that it didn't tell us what the petrol cost originally. And a neat way around this is just to say, well, let's say I started with $100 worth of petrol. Right? Let's say at the beginning of this period, at the beginning of last week, it cost me $100 to fill up my car. So, when it goes down by 18%, right, I decrease by 18%, I have 82% left. So let's say 100, it can be dollars, but we won't put the dollar sign in. 100 times 0.82. And that's going to tell me how much it cost to fill my car after the price went down by 18%. Now I could press equals, but we don't have to. This week it rose by 24%. So of that there, it went up by 24%. So that's times 1.24. Right? 0 point something for decrease, 1 point something for increase. And when I do this, again out with the calculator, 100 times 0.82 times 1.24, right, and see that that hasn't gone up by 6% at all. It's 101.68. Right? Therefore, the price has increased by, now because I started with 100, we could say that's like 100%. How has it changed from my original 100%? It's gone up by 1.68%. So that's the advantage of starting with 100 in that calculation. So it's increased by 1.68%. And it's important we say increased. Rightio, that's it for percentage increase and decrease. If you've got any questions, jot them down, ask me in class. I'll see you there.